The Gab and Jules Show is presented by Gusto. I'm Gab, he's Jules. No idea about the weather in London because we're here under the bright sunshine of Lower Manhattan, Jules.
Yeah, Gab.
And we're at the stage where the World Cup is in its knockout phase.
Yeah.
We already know Canada's into the round of 16. We'll get to them in a little bit. Brazil and Japan just finished through the magic of television and broadcasting and what else. There'll be some games that'll be played while we're on air, but we'll get to that later. But Jules, we need to start with Brazil and Japan because this was quite the scare for the Seleção.
Yeah, it was because they went a goal down in that first half. Although they dominated the game, they dominated the ball, they had enough chances to come back earlier than they did, but in the end it took a Martinelli goal in the 96th minute to win this game and qualify for the last 16. So a bit of a scare, but also I think a lot for them to learn of what happened in this game against Japan.
So I am particularly distraught. I was very much in two minds. As you know, I love Carlo Ancelotti, but obviously Japan is the last team I can support in the World Cup. Now they're out. I'm going to have to find somebody else to support, which is annoying. But in terms of Moriyasu, in terms of Japan, I just want to get to them before we get to Brazil. The way they set up, obviously with Japan, you have a lot of energy. You've got a lot of pace. You've got a lot of pressing. You've got Keito Nakamura in form from the wing. It looked to me like the game plan was what it should have been early on. They got the goal through Sana, maybe even somewhat unexpected. But then maybe they dropped off a little too much.
Yeah, I thought even from the start, I thought they were too passive. They were there to defend. The block was not too low, to be fair, but that back five and then the four leaving obviously way down his own up front, which was the system. I get it, but then there's a way of playing that system which is not the way they played. I was very, very disappointed by what Japan did, or more importantly, what they didn't do, Gab. 2 shots on target through the whole game, 35% of the ball. I think it's 5 shots all in all. It's not good enough considering the players that they have. And for me, they let far too much control to Brazil. They didn't put enough intensity in the areas that mattered the most. And there's a reason why they've never won a single knockout game in the World Cup, because when you get to that stage, they revert, especially under Moriyasu, to these kind of tactics all the time. And again, I don't think that was the right game plan today.
Yeah, I mean, we can debate we certainly debate the game plan. It does seem to me, and in general, when you go and you play that way, you're essentially hoping that you're going to nick something on the counter. Somebody's going to make a mistake because, ultimately you've got the striker up there against Gabriel and Marquinhos in open play. Danilo's older. Somebody makes a slip, somebody makes a mistake, and you're through. But we know that those are really low percentage tactics against the Brazil side, that when you give them so much of the ball, even when you congest the spaces, we saw so many of those crosses coming in, kind of those three-quarter crosses, which you think, all right, they're not great. Zion Suzuki got to a lot of them, but he's not going to get to all of them. And when Brazil have such a physical advantage as well, with the center backs coming up, with Casemiro, as we eventually saw, with Matias Cunha as well in the air, the dynamics of the game just change.
Yeah, I thought it was far too minimalist from Japan, and I think they can play much better football than what they showed today. And that's why I think they even themselves have to be disappointed by how the game went. Obviously, it's never nice when you consider a winner like that in the 96th minute when you thought you could get at least to extra time. But things, Brazil would have scored in extra time anyway. This game was never going to go to penalties. Japan was not doing anything, even with the substitutions that were, by the way, more defensive than anything else. Again, added to that, let's invite the pressure on us even more. And I just don't really understand why, because I really think they have the players to play a much better brand of football than they did today. And they have, to be fair, against the Dutch, for example, earlier in this tournament.
Against Germany in the last World Cup.
Yeah, for example, as well. But then it seems that when they get to this stage, maybe it's the nerves, maybe it's the expectations or the pressure, but they seem to very often revert to this kind of defensive game plan and tactics that, one, I don't think suit them that much, because you inevitably invite crosses to come in. And that's exactly what happened. And you're right, they dealt with most of them well. But the one ball from Gabriel where the marking was not great, the line wasn't great, Suzuki was maybe, again, a bit passive, and Casemiro scores. And at 1-1, there's always going to be just one winner.
All right, let's get to Brazil. Carlo Ancelotti went with, I think, what at this time he feels is his best lineup, with the packet in the middle of the park. I think once we got to halftime, he probably thought, and obviously he made that change, Endrick for Paquetá. That's probably a case of, I don't need the packet out there because there's no passing lanes for him. There's not much space for him to play in. Vinicius can try to attack the depth, but there just isn't much depth for him to attack. So he puts on Endrick. If you want to be super cynical, Jules, it's also like, all right, if I'm going to go out, let me go out with a striker all of Brazil wants to see out there. Sorry, the other striker all of Brazil wants to see out there other than Neymar. But suddenly you have another body in there, and you have that kind of 4-2-4, which we saw in the second half of the Haiti game and some of the other games Brazil has played in this World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, Paquetá was injured. I think the core of the substitution is the injury, really. But for Endrick to come where he didn't really seem to trust him before in the group stages game, for example, because he was not the first sub to come on, was maybe a bit strange. And in the end, Endrick, I think, was there in the box to be a nuisance. Didn't really do that much, to be fair. The Martinelli change, to be fair, for Cunha is the one that surprised me the most, and I was a bit like, not sure about this move, but actually worked out. But the ball from Bruno Guimaraes to Martinelli on the winning goal is the ball that Paquetá is the one that should provide those balls. And now with the injury, we're not sure if he'll be back for the last 16 games, for example. But I've been disappointed by Paquetá because, the second phase of the game is for Casemiro very much, but more importantly, Bruno Guimaraes. I get that. In the third phase, especially around that zone 14, this is where Paquetá should really be in control. And for me, he's been missing again today in this first half.
I think the issue here, look, we don't need to talk endlessly about Paquetá, but Paquetá becomes so important also because Raphinha is injured. And right now you realize that Brazil, for all their history, for all their passing prowess, if you're talking about people who can unlock defenses and give you that kind of creativity, it's really Paquetá and Raphinha. Obviously, Raphinha lined up on the wing earlier, but we know that he can also play a 10, and he's done that very well in the past, and he's done that for Brazil. If Paquetá doesn't recover, there's kind of like a big hole there in that role.
Yeah, although I thought they were quite disciplined through the whole game. I mean, again, when you have almost 70% of the ball, it's easy to be. But in transition, apart from the goal, which is a bad goal to concede, they were not too bad. But then again, I thought at times they pressed okay in the first half, maybe less so in the second half. And the balance of the team, I think Ryan brings you a lot of balance on that right-hand side. He's a hard-working winger with a great left foot. And I think it's not that I don't miss Raphinha, but I think this is working for them. The question is, if Paquetá can play in the next game, which would be a tough game, it's Ivory Coast or Norway now for Brazil in the last 16, I'd be very interesting to see where Carlo Ancelotti goes on how you replace Paquetá. If it's like for kind of a similar player, a slightly more defensive player, and push Bruno a bit higher, because I still think that Casemiro needs some help. And again today, despite the goal, great goal, and the celebration, for the rest, I'm still not sure about Casemiro in this World Cup either.
Better in the second half, no?
Well, yeah, because they had even more of the ball than in the first half. But there's many times where things go too quick for him. And that could be a problem against a team like Ivory Coast or Norway, who won't play like Japan played today, for example. So there's a lot of thinking, I think, for Carlo to do before the next game, that if Paquetá is not okay, I think the substitutions worked really well today. And I have to say, this is, for me, the most positive things for Brazilian Carlo Ancelotti, as well as qualifying, obviously, is that he uses subs really well.
Yeah, on the issue of the subs, we talk about value add, we talk about managers making big decisions. There's no question in my mind that if he makes the Martinelli for Cunha substitution, all of a sudden you're taking off a guy who's an aerial threat, a guy who's a center forward, for a guy who's a winger in a game where there is no real space for wingers other than delivering crosses. And if they go out and lose that game or get knocked out on penalties or whatever, this becomes a defining moment and Carleto gets slaughtered. I mean, would you say that's right?
Yeah, because Martinelli played central. So he was not a winger in this game at all. He was central. He was a centre forward.
Who's not a centre forward.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Martinelli and Casemiro, neither of whom is a centre forward, effectively playing centre forward.
The Martinelli goal is a centre forward, like super goal, really. But the thing is, you would have thought, okay, maybe Igor Thiago then with the size and the strength could be in there for all those crosses. And Carlos said it was clearly the game plan in the second half was to put all those balls in the box as much as possible, and to some extent it worked on both goals, really. But I think it was really interesting that clearly Ancelotti felt, okay, Igor Thiago, maybe after that first game against Morocco, we won't see Igor Thiago again in this World Cup anyway. But certainly that Martinelli, with a different profile, was maybe more was needed for this end of the game.
That's what I love about this, when managers make decisions that that are counterintuitive.
Yeah.
If AI had been managing Brazil, we would have seen Igor Thiago, right? No, we would have seen.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, no, because it's the logical thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
They're
yeah,
sitting,
it would have been.
you know, and he's gone into different directions as well. You say Paquetá was injured.
Yeah.
The guy always seems to be injured after he gets substituted, but whatever.
Yeah.
We'll find out how injured he really was. But they always seem to be these kind of counterintuitive moves that I think set great managers apart. And then when they blow up in their face, and we've seen it with Pep many times, then they get slaughtered for it. So they're putting their own rep, they're putting their own cred on the line. For the next game, we're in agreement. The two options are either assuming Raphinha is not back, and we don't expect him to be.
I don't think he'll be.
If Paquetá is not fit, if Paquetá's fit, we expect him to play. If he doesn't play, it's either some version of the 4-2-4, 4-4-2, call it what you like, that we've seen, or the alternative is adding a midfielder. Now, if you add a midfielder, you talked about pushing Bruno Guimaraes a little further forward.
Yeah.
But then you're also in a situation where you have to put in Fabinho.
Yeah.
Or is there somebody else that I'm forgetting about?
No. I think Fabinho, although Danilo came on late tonight, this afternoon. I think the idea would be Fabinho and Casemiro, which, to be fair, between them two, at their
it's
age,
a lot of experience.
and with their legs, it's the experience, and they probably, would play well with each other. And then you've got Bruno as a 10, Ryan stays on the right, Vini obviously on the left, who could have scored one of the goals of the tournament with that wonder save by Suzuki and then the post. And then obviously Cunha as your 9, unless Martinelli has convinced Carlo to give him a start, which again I think he will be super sub like Hendrick, and coming off the bench will be better for him. So I would think that right now with Ford, I think the game is on Sunday. So what are we today, Gabi?
Today is Monday.
So there's a bit of time to prepare for that game on Sunday. But I would think if Paquetá can't be fit, probably the likely option would be Fabinho and Casemiro in midfield.
Yeah, I think it'll probably also depend on who the opponent is, of course. Word on Vini, though, because I had to do my group stage 11, which for the strikers was kind of easy. For the center backs, kind of difficult, and I'm sure people will go and disagree with it. But you know what? You're fine. You can disagree. I had 2 Brazil players in there. One was Vini, and again today, I have to say this does not look like the Vini of Real Madrid. Even when he struggles, it seems like after the first game, he seems more involved. He seems more willing to help out, and he obviously can have those moments of magic, like the one where Zion lived up to his name and basically wiped out what would have been maybe the best goal we've seen in the World Cup so far.
Yeah. I mean, he was hard against this back 5, and that blocked for him to find space. Even the passing lanes were cut. It was difficult. It was never really one-on-one, but the moment where he had a bit of that time, I mean, the first touch on that chance, the chance on the post, and the first touch and nutmeg is just a piece of genius, really.
Yeah.
And after that, the dribbling is great. So he's there. He'll be disappointed that today he didn't really participate actively in the win in terms of goals and assists. Really, that's what we're talking about, because I think he was always a threat there, and that's why it's the most important here, that he's in the game. But a bit like for Neymar didn't come on today. I think if they'd gone to extra time, he would have come on. If they'd been winning the game, he would have come on. But the fact that he was a tie for so long, then obviously that pushed Carlo, I think, to leave Neymar on the bench, and then there was the winner anyway. So we didn't get to see Neymar, probably more for the next game, again, if needed. But for Vini, I think he showed again today, without being his best game of the tournament, how important he still is in this team.
My other Brazilian player in the group stage 11 is Bruno Guimaraes. That's not, you may not have had him, but that's not absurd.
No,
Okay. All right. I'll be dotting these throughout the show if I remember. We're going to be back with quick hits on the Gab and Joel Show, presented by Gusto.